The first time I saw my CEO outside the glass and steel world of our office, it wasn't behind a podium, or in a boardroom, or on a Zoom screen where she always looked untouchable. It was under a burning American sun, on a crowded beach, where salt winds slapped the air and laughter floated like seagulls. I saw her there, barefoot, real, human, and my brain couldn't accept it fast enough. And then, in the most humiliating second of my life, she caught me staring and said, calm as a blade, "My eyes are up here." I froze so hard it felt like time stopped just to watch me fail. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the kind of stories that remind us we're all human no matter our titles, please take a moment right now to like this video, comment, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel. Your support keeps these stories alive. My name is Ethan Carter, and I'm not the kind of man who ever expected to be in the same orbit as someone like Madeline Cross. That was her name, our CEO, spoken in the company like a warning and a prayer. She ran Crosswave Technologies out of San Diego, California, like a general runs a battlefield. She didn't smile much, she didn't waste words, she didn't forgive mistakes. And yet, in every meeting, every quarterly update, every crisp email she sent at 2:13 a.m., she carried this sharp, terrifying excellence that made people either rise or crumble. I had risen, barely, but only because I couldn't afford to crumble. I wasn't born into money. I didn't have family connections. I had student debt, a second-hand suit, and a mother back in Sacramento whose kidneys were failing, slowly enough to hurt us for years. The kind of sickness that doesn't strike like lightning but drips like a leaking faucet until your whole life is flooded. I worked late nights, weekends, anything I could, because insurance didn't care about my exhaustion. Bills didn't care about my grief. And my mother, Donna Carter, she cared too much. She would tell me she was fine even when her voice trembled. She would say God would provide, even when the pantry looked empty. At Crosswave, I was a mid-level data analyst, invisible in a sea of ambition. I was the guy who fixed mistakes quietly and sent reports that made other people look smart. I didn't chase credit. I chased stability. Every day I walked into that office building and promised myself I would survive another week, another month, until I could pay for one more treatment, one more specialist, one more hope. Madeline Cross was a different species. She was the type of woman people described with words like icy, ruthless, impossible. She wore tailored suits like armor and heels that sounded like judgment on marble floors. I'd only spoken to her directly once, when she corrected a number in my report with a single glance and asked me, without even raising her voice, if I knew what accuracy meant. I had apologized so hard my throat hurt. She had nodded once and walked away, leaving me feeling like I'd been inspected and found lacking. So when I took a rare weekend off, it wasn't for fun. It was because my body had started doing that thing where it punishes you for pretending you're fine. I had headaches that made light feel sharp. My chest felt tight at night, and I realized I hadn't seen the ocean in years even though it was right there, like freedom I didn't deserve. I drove to Coronado Beach on a Saturday morning, telling myself I'd sit for an hour, breathe, and return to my life like nothing happened. The beach was loud with normal happiness. Families with coolers, couples with umbrellas, kids screaming as waves chased them. The smell of sunscreen and grilled food made me ache with something I couldn't name. I walked along the shoreline with my shoes in my hand, letting cold water hit my ankles, and for the first time in months my shoulders loosened. I watched surfers cut through waves like they had no fear of falling, and then I saw her. At first I thought it couldn't be. My mind tried to reject it like a glitch, but it was her face, unmistakable even without makeup, framed by hair pulled into a simple ponytail. She wore sunglasses, a wide-brimmed hat, and a beach cover-up that fluttered in the wind. She was sitting alone near a lifeguard tower, reading a book like she belonged to the quiet part of the world. There was no entourage, no assistants, no security, just her, and the sea, and the sun. I stared. Not in a creepy way, not intentionally. It was just Shocking. Like seeing your teacher at the grocery store. Like realizing the moon has a backside. The CEO who terrified us was sitting there like a regular person, her feet in the sand, her posture relaxed. She looked younger, softer, almost fragile, and I hated myself for noticing that. Then she lifted her head. Even with sunglasses, I felt it. The instant awareness, the precise lock of attention. She turned toward me like she'd sensed my stare the way predators sense movement. I stopped walking. My brain screamed at me to look away, but I was too late. She took off her sunglasses slowly, and her eyes, sharp gray blue, met mine with a calm that made me feel naked. "My eyes are up here," she said. Not loud, not angry, just flat. Heat exploded in my face. I wasn't even looking at her body, not really, but the situation didn't care about my intentions. My mouth opened and closed like a fish. I wanted to vanish into the ocean. I stammered something like an apology, but it came out broken. She stared at me a moment longer, then nodded toward the empty sand near her chair like she was giving an order. "Sit," she said. It didn't feel like a choice. I sat down a few feet away, hands shaking slightly, the way they did before presentations. The waves sounded louder now, like they were mocking me. I waited for her to destroy me with words, to remind me who she was and who I wasn't. But instead, she looked back at her book, turned a page, and said something that made my heart stop for a different reason. "You're Ethan Carter," she said. "Data team. You don't take vacations." I blinked, stunned. She knew my name. She knew my habits. I'm just here for an hour," I managed. She gave a small hum like she'd expected that. The silence stretched, and I realized she wasn't interested in humiliating me further. She wasn't even performing, she was just there. And somehow that was more unsettling. Minutes passed. People around us laughed, ran, lived. And then, without looking at me, she asked, "Why do you work like you're running from something?" The question hit too close. My throat tightened. I could have lied. I should have lied. But something about the ocean, about being away from fluorescent lights and office politics, made honesty feel possible. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was the way she asked, not cruelly, but like she genuinely wanted the answer. So I told her, not in dramatic speeches, but in pieces. I told her about my mother, Donna, about dialysis, about the bills that arrived like threats, about the fear of losing her and the deeper fear of losing her because I couldn't afford to keep her alive. I admitted I'd been skipping meals, taking extra shifts, doing freelance work at night. I admitted I hadn't slept properly in months. Madeline Cross didn't react the way I expected. She didn't soften into pity. She didn't offer fake sympathy. She just listened, the way powerful people rarely do. When I finished, my chest felt hollow, like I'd poured out something sacred. She closed her book and finally turned fully toward me. "Your report last quarter," she said, "was the cleanest in the company." I blinked, confused. "You caught errors nobody else saw," she continued. "You didn't take credit. You didn't complain. You just fixed it. I didn't know what to say." Compliments from her were rarer than rain in a drought. She stared at the ocean for a long moment, then said quietly, "I used to work like that." That sentence carried weight, like a door opening into a room she kept locked. She told me, in careful fragments, that her father had built the first version of Crosswave in a garage in Arizona, that he had been brilliant, stubborn, and sick for most of her 20s, that she'd learned leadership not from books but from hospital waiting rooms and sleepless nights. She didn't say she understood, but she didn't have to. Her voice had that familiar steel, but underneath it was something else, something tired. Then she said, "You're going to burn out, and when you do, your mother won't be saved by your sacrifice." The words hurt because they were true. I looked down at my hands, embarrassed by the tears that threatened. I hadn't cried in years, not properly. But something inside me cracked open, and the ocean air rushed in. Madeline stood up, brushed sand off her legs and adjusted her hat. For a moment she looked like the CEO again, precise, controlled. She reached into her beach bag and pulled out her phone. "Give me your number," she said. I hesitated. Then I did. On Monday, I expected nothing. I expected maybe an awkward nod in the hallway, or worse, silence that proved the beach moment was just a strange hallucination. But at 9:17 a.m., I got an email from HR with the subject line, "Updated benefits package, immediate effect." I opened it with shaking hands. It was a promotion. Not huge in title, but huge in salary. A benefits upgrade. A medical assistance program I didn't even know existed. Flexible hours, work from home approved. And at the bottom, in formal language, it mentioned a special medical hardship review that would cover a significant portion of dependent healthcare costs. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. I didn't know what to do with that kind of mercy. Later that day, I was called into Madeline's office. My stomach twisted the whole walk there. Her assistant, a kind woman named Patricia, gave me a look like she already knew I'd survive. Madeline sat behind her desk, calm as ever. No beach hat, no book, just the CEO. "You didn't ask for help," she said. I didn't think I could," I whispered. "You can," she replied. "You should have." She slid a folder toward me. Inside were resources, contacts, and a note from a specialist program in Sacramento that could fast-track my mother's care. I didn't understand how she'd done it so quickly. My voice broke. "Why are you doing this?" She didn't answer immediately. She looked at me like she was deciding how much truth I deserved. "Because someone helped me once," she said finally. And I never forgot what it felt like to be drowning quietly. I walked out of her office like my feet weren't touching the floor. The weeks that followed were not magically perfect. My mother still struggled. There were still scary nights, still hospital smells, still prayers whispered into darkness. But now there was support. There was breathing room. I could take her to appointments without fearing I'd lose my job. I could sleep more than 4 hours without guilt eating me alive. And something changed inside me too. I started noticing people again. I started helping coworkers the way I used to before life hardened me. I started volunteering at a local food pantry on Sundays, bringing my mother when she felt strong enough. Donna smiled more. She laughed sometimes. Real laughter, not the polite kind. And every time she did, I felt like I was being given back pieces of my life. One evening, months later, Crosswave held a charity event at a coastal resort. The ocean was there again, calmer this time, like it remembered me. I stood near the balcony with a drink I barely touched, watching the sunset paint the water gold. I felt different, not rich, not powerful, but steady. Madeline Cross stepped beside me, quiet as always. "You look healthier," she said. "So do you," I replied before I could stop myself. She glanced at me, surprised, then gave the smallest smile, like a crack in ice. "I'm trying," she said. I nodded. Me too. We didn't need more words. The ocean filled the space between us like forgiveness. And that's when I understood something I'll never forget. Sometimes the people who seem coldest are the ones who've been burned the most. Sometimes the sharpest leaders are just survivors who never learned how to rest. And sometimes the most humiliating moment of your life, like getting caught staring on a beach, can become the doorway to the greatest blessing you never expected. If this story touched your heart even a little, please don't just scroll away. Like the video, share it, and subscribe, because every small act of support helps this channel keep spreading stories of hope, healing, and second chances. And before the ending, I have one special request. Comment, "I choose kindness" if you believe the world still needs compassion, even in places where people expect cruelty. Because I walked onto that beach feeling like a tired nobody, and I walked away with something priceless. The reminder that kindness can come from the last person you expect, and it can change everything.